Welcome to Backstage 421, the musicians only podcast, with your host, author, and music lover, Charles Campbell. Charles will have an awesome array of guests from many genres of music, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. By the way, Ray Mattis is the composer of this awesome intro music.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Backstage 421, the musicians only podcast. And I'm small town horror author Charles Campbell. Might seem a little weird that a horror author is hosting a music podcast, but I'm also a music lover. And today we have a special guest, a guy I met at a Jen Wigmore show a couple years ago in California. His name is Doug Worthen, and he's a very accomplished musician. I've read through his bio, and he's done a lot of things, and we're going to talk about some of those things. But he's primarily a guitarist. And welcome to the show, Doug.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Awesome.
And just to start off with, I want to show you what I'm wearing.
Awesome. Well, I'll show you what I'm wearing, and you'll get this more than the audience.
Oh, yeah. There you go. Ever the Jen fan.
That's right. Well, yeah, I'm a little overboard with Jen, but I'm not going to apologize for it.
Well, good.
All right, cool. Well, I want to talk about a few things with you, Doug.
Sure.
You are an accomplished musician, and I've read through your bio and I've listened to the things that you've sent me, and you have some interesting stories, and I'm not going to read them out of the bio. I want you to share them with the audience. One of the things I want to start with is, how did you first get into music? What inspired your love of music? And you have an interesting story of how you got your first guitar. So why don't we go through some of your background?
Well, my father was a music educator, so really I didn't have much choice but to like music and be involved in it because I grew up in it. We'd always go see his concerts, and then my mother was a ballroom dance teacher, so I'd listen to all of her Latin records and everything else that she was using to teach her students. And then that inspired my love of rhythm. So I was always into music as a child. But then one time my mother took me to hear a band that was doing an audition for a dance she was throwing. And this band, I seem to remember they all had blue shirts and they were just like the Beach Boys. And I thought, that's it. I want to do that. The power was so striking. It was great. And so I remember making a fake guitar out of one of those little pull xylophones. Took a cardboard tube in the end, and I pretended like it was a guitar. So my parents bought me a guitar for Christmas, just a cheap little plastic one. I was so excited. 3 days later, my brother broke the neck off. So that was the end of that.
Oh, man.
Much later, and boy, I was probably 14, 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. And my great-grandmother actually gave me an old acoustic guitar of hers. And then from that point, I never looked back. I just started playing all that I could.
Nice. Yeah, that's a cool story. My dad, he's a musician. He plays anything that has strings, and he can play the harmonica. He tried to teach me as a child, but I just didn't have the talent. My brother can play, but my dad's really good. So I've been around string instruments all my life. He can play anything from an acoustic guitar or to a banjo, even this shovel-looking thing. I don't know what all the stuff he has is, but pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Now, you've played with a lot of bands, and you played a lot of gigs, but I want to talk about the time a wrong number and iffy audition led you to your wife, because I thought that was a very interesting story, and I'm sure people would like to hear that.
It was really fascinating because I played in musical theater for years in the pit orchestras, and that kind of dried up. People I knew left. So I pretty much sold everything and quit playing music and took up mountain climbing. Well, one day, this is pre-caller ID, somebody called and I answered and they said, "Hi, I'm looking for Sherry." I said, "Well, I don't know a Sherry. It's the wrong number." They said, "Well, I'm looking for Sherry, keyboard player." I said, "I don't know Sherry. I don't know the keyboard player." She said, well, do you know any keyboard players? I said, no, but I play guitar. And she's like, oh, do you want to join a band? I thought, well, sure, why not? She said, can you come tonight and audition? Well, I didn't have anything to play. So I had to say, no, I can't. This was a Wednesday night. She said, can you come Friday? I said, sure, Friday will work. So I hung up. I hurried and called my friends and said, hey, can I borrow the guitar I sold you? Another friend, can I borrow the amp I sold you? I went and grabbed those. And then when I showed up on Friday, I started walking up the driveway to this house, and I heard this horrible noise coming out of the garage. I thought, oh, no, it's a bunch of high school kids. I can't do this. So I actually spun around in the driveway and started walking back to my car. I thought, no, I said I'd show up. I've got to do it. So I turned all the way back around, started walking up, and thought, no, this is horrible sounding. I can't do this. I spun around again and started walking back to the car. I thought, no, I'm a man of my word. I said I'd show up. I'll go in for 15 minutes and I'll just say, no, thank you. And then I'll leave. So I turned back around and I went in. Well, they weren't high school kids. They were just auditioning people, and they weren't a very good band at this point. So I played a little bit and they said, great, can you do the gig? And I said, when? They said, tonight. Like, oh, okay, sure, why not? Well, of the other two guys that showed up, one didn't go to the gig because he couldn't drink on stage. And the other guy and I ended up being the guitar players in this band. One night, his sister came to see us. And from then on, we've been together 30 plus years. So that's how I met my wife. And if I had just not got a wrong number, and if I had turned around and actually left, that I never would have met her.
Never would have met her. Never would have had your daughters. Yeah,
No,
it's crazy how things happen.
I
A
probably
similar,
never would have met you even, because I
yeah,
probably wouldn't have gone to the show. Yeah.
yeah, probably. Yeah, I had a similar situation, not involving me, but someone else. I used to work for a company, and I managed a whole bunch of people. And this kid, well, I won't call him a kid. He's probably in his 30s.
Mm.
He walked up, and I had the wrong list. I thought he failed the entrance exam to get into this job. I said, no, you didn't make it. And he's like, oh, too bad. And he starts to walk off. And I said, oh, no, I'm looking at the wrong list. I said, you actually did make it. And he came back and he was like, oh, that's great. Long story short, he met his wife at that job.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
had he walked out,
Yep.
yeah,
Exactly.
same kind of deal. There's another thing in your bio that really stuck out to me that I want to get, the deeper story. Now, I've heard of the $100,000 bar. I've had some myself, the caramel and crispy chocolate bars. But you ended up with a $50,000 bar, literally. So how did that happen?
Well, I remember one night I was with my girlfriend at the time, and she said, let's go over to 7-Eleven, walk over there and grab something. I said, sure, why not? So we walked over to 7-Eleven, and I was looking around. Nothing appealed to me, nothing at all. I'm just like, oh, I don't know. Here's a Nestle's Crunch Bar. It has a contest. I'll take that. So I grabbed a big Diet Coke. We walked back to her house, and I opened it up, and it's like, oh, it looks like I get to enter a contest, I thought. So I started reading the fine print because there were two matching pots of gold on the wrapper. And I read it again and realized this is an instant winner of $50,000. So the next day I contacted Nestle's or the contest people, and eventually they gave me huge giant check like 4 feet long, and I had $50,000.
That
It's
is
crazy.
crazy. That is crazy to me. Wow. Well, those were the interesting stories I wanted to jump on real quick. Now we'll get back to music.
Yeah.
Uh, so you are an accomplished musician, and what I want to know is what some of your earlier influences were. Who were the bands you listened to? Who did you aspire to be like? What are some of the genres you loved coming up, and
Mhm.
just a general background in the music you listen to.
Well, you know, not counting my parents' records, I think the first record I got was a Beatles record. And I just turned into a Beatles fanatic. Now, they were broken up by the time I discovered them.
Right.
So I read all the books I could, and I just thought the Beatles were the greatest thing. And so I studied everything. I tried to play like them. We had a Beatles cover band, and we even entered a quartet festival, and we all dressed up in the same kind of suits and shirts that they wore in the early 60s and played. And there were even girls in the audience screaming for us and that. And so I went from there, and I started shopping at thrift stores to find old records, which is apparently now a thing again.
It
But
is. I have a record player with
yeah,
a bunch of records. Yeah.
so I found a Frank Zappa record, Frank Zappa and the Mothers live at the Fillmore East, and they had Flo and Eddie, who were the Turtles.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started listening to that. I thought, this is great. This is comedy theater on record. Plus, there was amazing instrumental music. And then I bought a Kraftwerk album. I thought, electronic music, that's great. I love this stuff. And it just kind of branched out from there. And then one day I was doing a report at school on John Lennon. And in the book I was reading, they mentioned this band called the Grateful Dead. And I'd never heard of them. I didn't know who they were, but it sounded really fascinating. So I had to go out and buy an album. It's like, wow, these guys are really great. They're different than everybody. This was a studio album called Terrapin Station. So there wasn't a lot of jamming on it. But eventually I figured out, oh, this is what they do. I started buying their records, and I was the only Deadhead I knew. So I didn't have friends to go to all the shows like most Deadheads do.
Right.
But I convinced a couple friends to drive down from Salt Lake City to Phoenix, Arizona in a VW Bug. So we did the classic hippie thing. And I saw my first show there, and Warren Zevon opened for him, and he was big with Werewolves of London at the time. And
Oh yeah.
I was just captivated by the kind of jazz influence of all the jamming, where they would just play whatever and it didn't matter. They just played. And I thought, that's great. I love that, because growing up and listening to my dad's bands and jazz bands and things, improvisation was totally natural to me. And so I just fell in love with that. And eventually I found a guitar player named Robin Trower. And even though I'm not much into the blues, he's a blues guitar player, and I loved his playing. And Peter Frampton came out. I'm like, oh, he's great too. It never ends. I'm always finding somebody new when I have time to listen to music for myself, So those are the basic influences, I think.
Yeah. I'm kind of like you. We're similar in age, so I kind of grew up in the same era. So my first love was my mother's first love of music. I was an Elvis Presley fan as a little kid, and he was still alive when I was a little kid, so that tells you how old I am. But I listened to a ton of Elvis records, and I noticed in here you worked on Grease, some of the shows you played.
Oh yeah.
She had that album, and she took me to that movie when I was a kid. So it sounds like we have a lot of the same musical tastes coming up, because I listened to a lot of the same people you did.
Yeah.
And older, as I got older, my music kind of slanted toward the female vocalist for some reason. I don't know why, but that's just the way it happened.
Oh yeah.
Yep. But I want to talk about some of the music that you've done and some of the people you've worked with. A couple of the big notes that jumped out to me, and you shared this with me recently, is you worked with Gina Osmond and the Bone Band. Now, for the folks that don't know who Gina Osmond is, most of you know the name Osmond, and yes, she's a part of those Osmonds. So, kind of let us know what it's like playing with Gina and how you got that gig.
I have a lot of weird, strange tales for my career. And this one's fascinating because originally it was just the Bone Band. They were just called Bone. And they'd been around Salt Lake for 25 years. Well, unfortunately, their guitar player passed away. And so they called me, and I'd filled in for him for a few times, and I knew him. He was a good guy. So they called and said, hey, he died. Would you fill in for him until we find a new guy? I said, sure. And then, of course, I became the new guy and stuck around. Well, one time I couldn't play because they had booked a gig and I was already booked. So they had Gina Osmond come sit in with them. Well, she brought a guitar player, and because of her name, she was able to start booking other venues. So I kind of got pushed to the back. Right. And then he took over. And, I got busy with other projects. Well, the sad thing then is that guitar player passed away.
Oh, wow. Maybe you don't want to be a
I
guitar player for
know. It's like the Spinal Tap moments, right? So, they called me back, and at the time I wasn't available. So they had a few other people playing with them, and they finally said, "Hey, can you sit in on a gig coming up?" And I said, "Sure, I got time to do that." And eventually, after practice or so, they're like, "Hey, stay with us, please stay with us." I said, "Okay, I think I can fit you in this summer." And the nice thing is that Gina she's just like a normal person. It's not like she's a huge star or anything like that, but she's a go-getter. So we get to play a lot of gigs, and it's been a challenge because she plays a lot more pop stuff. We do songs by Dua Lipa
Oh,
and
yeah.
Sade and Pat Benatar, a lot of things that I haven't ever got to play before. So we range from, White Stripes all the way up to funky stuff, and it's really fun because it stretches my abilities, but also it's challenging because I'm new, and it's like, here's a new song. We're going to play it Friday. Oh, okay. It's Tuesday. I'll have it down. Let's go. So she's keeping me plenty busy.
Well, that's good. Well, you said Sade. I'm a big Sade fan.
Oh, yeah.
So I loved her growing up, and I've got a box set over there, seen her in concert
Oh,
twice.
wow, man.
Yeah, love Sade. Now there's another guy you played with he was a pretty big star, especially in the 90s, Doug Stone. How was it like?
Yeah.
What was it like playing with Doug? And, how many shows did you play with him?
That's kind of an odd one-off kind of a deal. He was coming to a country fest out in rural Utah, and he doesn't travel with a band, apparently. So we got a list of his songs, and they said, "Go for it, learn them." So the band I was in at the time, we just learned all the songs that we could. And then the day of the show, we pull up not knowing what we're going to do. And he just comes up and he says, "Hi, I'm Doug." It's like, "Hi, I'm Doug." We got to talk. And, I was hanging backstage with Mo Bandy. I don't know if you know Mo Bandy.
I remember Mo Bandy. Oh, yeah. My grandmother listened to all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I remember, we were taking pictures and that. Mo Bandy grabbed me and he said, "Hey, a couple good looking guys like us need our picture taken, don't we?" And so he just grabbed me, hugged me around the shoulder and pulled me in, and we got a picture. Then we go on stage and he turns to us and said, "What are we doing?" It's like, "It's your show. You're Doug Stone." He's like, "Just call him out." And so we did. And the sad thing was, it was in the middle of a hot summer day. There was a few people in the shade at the front of the stage. And then out in the vendors areas and where the campers were, people there. There was hardly anybody there to see this giant of country music.
Oh, wow.
So we had a fun show. And afterwards, he's like, "Hey, great. That was fun. Thanks." My drummer hung out with him, and they, partied it up. And I took the 4-hour drive home. So it was really fun.
Did you did that with no rehearsal? Did you guys rehearse at all?
Not with Doug Stone. No.
Wow.
No, he just showed up and told us to call out the songs. And that's part of the Grateful Dead that I've always loved, that improv and that energy of just, oh, this is brand new. We've never done this. And it just puts the brain on edge, and then you just go for it.
Oh, that's crazy to me. How a singer can just get on stage. Okay, play them. Let's go.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, I'm shifting gears just a little bit. Some of the things that kind of stuck out to me in the song lists you sent me, and I listened to all of them, but a couple stuck out to me. One was called "Ornery and Mean." That sounded like something my dad would play. Tell me a little bit about that song. I liked it. It was an original track.
Ornery and Mean. I'm trying to think
Or do you
which
remember
one that was.
That was off Lonesome. Or yeah, I'm trying to look at my notes. Lonesome. Oh, that was the name of the song. Lonesome, Ornery and Mean. I wrote the song, the title down, but that was one that stuck out to me because it sounded like something my dad would play.
If it's what the track I'm thinking it is, I was working with a country singer named John Bingham, and we had a band called Bulletproof, and he loved Waylon. Yeah, he just loved Waylon Jennings. So we got together in this little shack he had on his property and put up a few mics, and we're trying to make a demo, and we just kind of It never did really get finished, but it's like, okay, let's do it. And then,
Okay, is that actually a Waylon song? My dad used
yeah.
to sing all those.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, I think it's Waylon. I,
Okay.
I was never into the old time country music until I had to start playing it.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad was that he listened to Waylon and Willie and all those
Oh, yeah.
guys. But yeah, I didn't realize that was actually a Waylon song.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that's why it registered because he
Uh-huh.
listened to that and
Yeah.
sings it all the time. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, it sounds like something my dad would play.
Yeah. Exactly.
And one of the pieces on a soundtrack that you worked on, River Bright, that was very engaging. So how is it working on soundtracks versus producing something with a band?
Well, the nice thing about doing a soundtrack is that I get to do whatever I want, and I'm usually by myself. So there's nobody to have any input or argue and say, no, I don't like that, or I want to do it this way, or this is the part I hear. So there's no compromise. I just do what I want. And for that, I was doing it for a video. It was actually a school video I was taking. And it was just a river. I thought, well, what sounds like a river? So I just kept a drone in the bass as I picked the acoustic guitar. And then I just kept adding. And it's like a good chef. You add until it's done, and then you stop. And
Right.
that's what I did, just adding acoustic guitar, adding some strings and vocals, synthesizer vocals and things. So just kind of put it all together. So what you hear, probably the very first time I ever played some of those parts, I just put them down and it's like, yep, that worked. Okay.
I liked it. I thought it was really well done. How many soundtracks have you worked on?
Um, as far as the actual projects of the soundtrack, not a whole lot really, because most of the stuff is either self-produced or
Hmm.
like I did a commercial for Cash America pawn shops with my daughter. She was the photographer on that. And then one for the school I was teaching at, we were doing an interactive DVD, which was, all the thing back then. And they
Yeah,
needed
yeah.
music to go with it. So part of the deal was this was the Eaglegate soundtrack. We wanted to make it like something every student could do because they all got a MacBook when they signed up. So every song on that was done on my MacBook in GarageBand using only the samples and loops provided with GarageBand.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
there's no playing, no nothing, no adding in extra sounds. It was all self-contained in GarageBand. So I'd have to go through and find everything that fits in the same key.
Got that on my phone.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Well,
recorded stuff on my phone too, but that was really fun, just trying to come up with different ideas. And then, of course, I finished my part and nobody else finished theirs. So it never did get released or anything. So I just put it up as my own album.
it sounded great, man. And I didn't realize it was all from GarageBand. I might have to
Yeah.
tinker around with that a little bit,
Yeah. Oh,
you
yeah.
know. Now you are a touring musician, and and from what I've seen, you're very busy. And some of the musicians I've talked to in the other podcast, they've had an interesting story or two. Does anything stick out from any of those shows that comes to the top of your mind?
Well, there is one. Um,
Okay.
I was playing with a Mexican band at the time. We recorded an album called Estilo Fresco. Now, I don't speak Spanish and I don't have Mexican heritage in my background, but I love the music. And so I ended up getting into this band with a few other people who like second, third generation Mexicans. So nobody really spoke Spanish very well. But we went to a town in Nevada, a small town called Wells, Nevada. But they're saying, hey, this is going to be a really big event. There's going to be people coming from all over the county and they're going to come and do this dance. And we were used to playing for sometimes 6,000, 7,000 people.
Oh wow.
So we showed up or I'm driving into town and it's just a blizzard outside, snow all over. It's freezing cold. And I see people on the side of the road waving. I thought, uh-oh, there's been an accident. I better help. So I pull over. It's the guys in the band. And they're saying, oh, we're glad we caught you. You do not want to see the rooms that they're putting us up in. I said, why? What's wrong? They said, it's above the bar and there's holes in the carpet. There's buckets of brown water underneath holes in the ceiling. The beds are all stained. The water that comes out of the tap is brown. It's like, okay. They said, we're getting a room at the hotel right here. So we got all set up in our own rooms, then went to the bar, and the bar owners spoke Spanish. And our singer, she grew up speaking English. She didn't grow up really as Mexican or anything. So they eventually worked it out. We got set up, and then we started to play to nobody. So, that's always exciting for a musician to have nobody as an audience. Well, eventually a few guys came in, started drinking, and one of them came up and said, "Hey, this ain't the big city. We don't want any of that big city music," because we didn't play the traditional bond like they wanted to hear. And he was very deadly serious about, I don't want to ever hear any of that again tonight. So the
Oh,
guys in the
wow.
band are like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We don't play that kind of music. I said, just turn it up, play really fast and sloppy. They said, no, seriously, what are we going to do? I said, turn it up, play it fast and sloppy. They said, okay, I guess we'll give it a shot. So we did. We turned it up. We played everything almost double time, played it really sloppy. Next thing we know, that guy's like, I love it. It's great. It's wonderful. But, and he had a but. He said, but you guys would be really good if you got rid of the white boy drummer. I said, no, he's okay. It's my brother. Because we were the only two that didn't have any Mexican heritage at all. I said, no, he's fine. He's studying percussion at Brigham Young University. He's fine. No, you guys got to get rid of the white boy. It's like, he's my brother. I'm not Mexican. He says, no, you're good, Vato. Get rid of the white boy. We're like, okay, whatever.
Oh,
It was
nice.
a crazy experience. And of course, then they didn't have enough cash to pay us. So they wrote us a check for part of it. And naturally, it bounced. And,
Oh,
being in Nevada, we would have had to go to Nevada to sue them to get it. And we just told our singer, I said, just let it go. We'll just take the loss. It'll be a great story later. And now it's going to be enshrined forever on your podcast.
well, there you go. A great story. I love great stories. Something else that, and I'm jumping around a little bit, that caught my eye in the bio, and I meant to put it on my note sheet. Uh, this actually didn't get aired, but you did something with Toby Keith, and while you didn't actually meet him face to
Yeah.
face, there's probably an interesting story there. It was for a television show. Why don't you share that with the audience? That was
Okay.
kind of cool.
Well, somehow somebody got my name, and I got a call from casting agents to go down and audition for the show Touched by an Angel. And they wanted a band for Toby Keith, who's going to be doing a scene at like a high school reunion or something. And we all sat around because that's how TV is,
Right.
a lot of waiting. And then they said, okay, everybody just line up, come here. We're going to take your picture and take your name. That was my whole audition. I stood there. They took my picture, took my name, and then, what instruments you play? I said, I play guitar. I get a call and said, hey, we want you to be Toby's bass player. I'm like, okay, well, I play bass too. So I borrowed some gear that looked more impressive than mine and cleaner. We went up and we sat in their base camp waiting and waiting. We had breakfast. We're still waiting. We had lunch and we're just standing around outside. Finally, somebody came and said, oh, do you guys have a dressing room? It's like, oh, no, that'd be great. They gave us like a little outhouse sized trailer slot to sit in. So there's enough room for four guys to sit shoulder to shoulder. And it was 4 feet deep. So we would have been staring at a wall. So we just hung out outside. The wardrobe person came by and said, oh, here, let me change some of your stuff. Toby Keith showed up, walked by his trailer and waved at him inside. And we waited and waited. And it's like 4:00 in the afternoon. We've been there since 5 or 6. And then they said, we're running late. We don't have time to film you guys. Toby's going to do it by himself. So hurry up and go get your gear. So we had to rush on set, grab our gear. All the tech people are yelling at us, hurry up, get out of our way. So we hurried and grabbed our gear, went down, got our pay voucher signed. And because it was so early, I called up a singer I work with, Pamela Lynn, and said, hey, I'm free tonight, because she had a gig. I said, if you could still use me. So she called the guy that was filling in and said, hey, never mind, Doug can do it. So then I went up to Park City Ski Resort and played a gig there. It was a really good payday, but I never got to be on TV or meet Toby Keith.
Oh man, that sucks. It was a good story though. I mean, that's like the military, the hurry up and wait stuff. I remember
Oh
that.
yeah.
Just sit all day, and then for you, nothing really happened except you got paid and you got to make your gig. That's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. Now, you said Pamela Lynn. Let's segue into that because she has a pretty cool podcast, Pamela Private Eye. So tell me how you got associated with that. Obviously, it was through you playing with her band, but
Right.
tell me how you met her and how that podcast formed.
You
And
know,
by the way, guys, you can go listen to it. It's Pamela Private Eye. You can find it wherever you get your podcast. But anyway.
yeah. Well, my brother, the drummer, was working at a music store, and she walked in. Apparently, this is the story I get, and she needed a bass player, and so she asked him, said, "Hey, do you know any bass players?" And I got the most stellar review ever from my brother. He says, "My brother plays guitar. I don't know if he plays bass." And she's like, "Okay, can I get his number?" So I get this call from a complete stranger, and she says, "Hey, I need a bass player." It's like, "Oh, all right, no problem. What's the date?" And she tells me, and I show up at the club. And when I showed up, there was a bartender and one server. Nobody else in there. I'm thinking, is this the right place? So I waited and I waited. There's some stuff on the stage. Eventually, guys started showing up. It's like, oh, okay, I'm in the right spot. I put my gear on stage. And then the band I'd been in previously wouldn't allow any drinks on stage at all. Well, I asked her, I said, "Is it okay if I have a drink on stage?" And the look on her face was just shocked. She's like, I said, "Don't worry. It's just Diet Coke. It's just Diet Coke. I just drink Diet Coke." And she had worried, "Oh, great. I got another drunk to play with me." It's like, "Oh, nope, it's Diet Coke." And so that was fine. And we go to start the set, and she's like, "Okay." And she just starts calling out songs. I've never met any of these people. I don't know what they're going to play. Most of the songs I didn't know. Most of them I've heard. And so we ended up playing, and she must have liked me because she kept me around, and it's been 20
What'd
plus
you
years now.
What'd you do? Just strum the bass, or kind of pick up?
Well,
Or
that's my Grateful Dead background, of
okay,
developing the ear. And it's like anything. If you do it enough, it becomes habit. So I know where the fingers go. I just need my brain to understand where that needs to be. And so if I watch other people and I say, "Oh, okay," after a while, it's like, "All right, this is the verse. Okay, this is the chorus." Lock in with the drummer, make sure I don't step on anybody's toes, and
right.
we can roll on down. And eventually, she's the one who hooked me up working with Boots Randolph because she's a sax player.
Hmm.
And she got to be good friends with Boots Randolph, and he'd come into town. We do shows. I only got to do his big show, I think, once, but we did a lot of little shows before and that. And then the sad thing was, sad for me anyway, his band realized, oh, wait, Boots is going to Utah in February and going skiing, and it's getting paid for because it's a gig. So they all wanted to come out from Nashville. And so they would come out and, we'd open for them and then they'd play the big show. So it was
Oh,
great fun.
yeah. Well, that's cool, man. Boots Randolph. That's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah. For people who don't know, that's the Yakety Sax Man, which was the theme from Benny Hill.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah. A lot of people, I get this blank look. It's like, who? But every year at Christmas time, they play Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, and he plays the sax solo on that. So it's kind of a little heartbreaking because I know he's passed away now. And it's like, oh, it's a little
Right.
bit of sadness.
Sadness and remembering though.
Yeah.
That could be a happy memory.
Oh, yeah.
So okay, well, let's talk a little more about Pamela and her podcast. How'd you get involved with that? Or are you? What is your involvement in her podcast other than just being a listener? Is that
It,
the extent, or
it's
do you
just
do a little
mostly,
more?
you know,
Okay,
through all the years, I'd heard about some of these cases because, well, when she talks about my band has a gig, well, I'm that band. So,
right,
I've heard some of those stories. And actually, there was one, I don't know if you remember, she was tracking an Elvis impersonator
yeah.
and he was playing and supposedly had a back injury, but she caught him on film carrying the PA gear out. Well, we reenacted that. And so I got to be one of the thugs in the Elvis entourage, and we are filming it in the Old Town, Midvale, Utah area. So we're running down the street chasing with a guy in an Elvis costume, and people are just staring at us. And I also got to play a convicted murderer for one case where she was sitting across from me, and I'm supposed to look all dejected because I've been sentenced to life in prison. I'm wearing the orange jumpsuit. And she's used a few of my soundtrack pieces in her podcast, but mostly I'm just a big fan and just a listener, because she even still surprises me about things. It's like, oh, wow, I never knew that. But now she can tell the whole story.
Yeah, well, her podcast is amazing. I do have it on my rotation. So,
Yeah.
my day job is a work from home gig, so I have a lot of time to listen to things.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now I want to go
I
ahead.
was going to say, I listen to you, Henrik Kuto, Weekly Spooky, and Pamela Private Eye. That's my whole podcasting right there.
Oh, well, cool. Yeah, Henrik's an awesome guy. I
Yeah.
love Henrik to death. He does such a good job narrating those things. I wish I
Oh,
had
yeah.
the charisma he has.
Well, not many people have the charisma like he does.
Yeah. He's out there
Oh,
in a
yeah.
good way.
Oh, yeah.
Now I want to bring it around to something we both mutually love. I've got some of her images
Oh, yeah.
behind me. Let's talk about Jen a little bit. How did you discover Jen Wigmore? When did you first hear her?
I don't know the date, but it was ages ago. I was looking at moving to New Zealand. When
Wow.
I was a kid, my dad got a job teaching in Samoa. It was called Western Samoa then. So I lived there for 3 years, and it was really tied to New Zealand.
Yeah.
And so I've always had this fascination with it. Well, when I was looking to move there, I saw this commercial for Air New Zealand, and they used Under My Skin as the theme song, and they all had body paint, and they weren't wearing clothes. It was all body paint and strategically filmed, So that I thought, wow, this is an old timey sounding voice. Who is this? It's got to be somebody from the 30s or 40s or something. And I started looking and discovered, no, this is a modern person. And she just barely put out her EP at the time, that first EP. So I was really excited. It's like, oh, she's finally going to do a full album,
Right.
It's like, holy smoke, right?
Yep.
Yep. And I fell in love with it. I'm telling everybody, hey, do you think we can do this? I know it's a female singer, but could we do Black Sheep, in the band? And they're
Yeah.
like, all they cared about was like, wow, she's hot. It's like, well, yeah, but could we do her music? And it never happened, and I told my family all about it, and, they all got excited. And so I've been following her since almost the very beginning.
See, and I haven't. I wish and I told her that in the podcast. I wish I had listened before. I didn't know who she was till a television commercial. And the reason I'm bringing Jen up in this podcast is because that's really how I met Doug at a Jen Wigmore concert at Pappy and Harriet's in 2021. I think it was. 2021.
Yeah.
And so I've been a Jen fan since 2012, but he's got me beat a little bit on that. But that's why I brought her up. And she's in New Zealand right now. So I think she's either playing her last show or has played her last show. I don't know. Their time zone is a little different than ours.
Yeah.
Than mine specifically. Like it's midday tomorrow there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why I brought Jen up. And I'll bring her up whenever I get the chance.
No, it was really great. I mean, the thing about it was I knew you from the fan group, and I knew who you were. But then I remember we were standing, over by the restroom waiting for our wives, I think, or yours might have been outside and I was waiting for mine. And we got talking a little bit, and you're like, I'm an author. It's like, oh, really? So am I. I'm still working on my first book. And you tell me, oh, I've got all these books. It's like, I got to go check this guy out. And I got the very first book, Chasing the White Rabbit, that night after I met you.
Yeah, well, I remember that, and I think you've gotten every book since. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Now I know this is a music podcast, but we could talk author stuff a little bit if you'd like.
Sure.
Because I'm always interested in other authors in what their process is in writing. So we're going to segue into that a little bit. So I know you're working on a novel, or you finished your novel, or I don't know where you're at in the draft, but. What is your process when you sit down to write? What drives your creativity? What brings you the story? I'm always interested in other points of view from other writers. So kind of tell me your process.
Well, I think the technical term among authors in their author groups is I'm a pantser. I fly by the seat of my pants. So
Right.
I don't outline. I had a basic idea for this novel. Now I was originally going to write a single book. And I thought I better take a writing class. So I did. And I said, this is the basic idea. And the instructor's like, oh, no, that's 3 books. You can't put all that in one. And so I finished the first one. I've sent it off to a publisher, and we'll see. It'll probably, I'll probably end up self-publishing, but I had to take a chance at least a little bit. But
Yeah.
I just had this idea. What if there were no living things on the planet except for, just a handful of humans, no animal life, no insect life, just vegetation and humans, that aliens have basically sanitized the earth. What happens? The technology's all dead. How do these individuals survive? Do they find each other? How can they adapt, Because I
Right.
know some people, I used to ask this question all the time back in the 80s. What would you do if Salt Lake got hit by a nuclear bomb? And virtually everybody would just say, die. And I'm like, well, I have a plan. If I know it's coming, some friends and I, it's like, we're going to meet up at this mine up by Park City, and we're going to live down there. There's supplies, and we know what's there. And so that's where we're going to head. Unfortunately, it's now under a reservoir. So that plan's shot. Can't do that. But so I just start writing, and I just see where it takes me, and it's just
Yeah.
like playing music. I am improvising as I go along. That's my favorite thing to do. Just create on the fly, see what happens, whatever that conduit is from the netherworld or wherever. I
Yeah.
just let it flow through me and start writing. And sometimes it's like, I got nothing today. And other times it's like, I need more time. I need more time. I got to keep writing.
Yeah. Well, my style's very similar. I don't know if I'm a full-on pantser, but I'm somewhat of a pantser. I
Good.
usually have my beginning in kind of where I want to go at the end, and the pants stuff
Mhm.
is in the middle where I'm
Right.
just flying by the seat of my pants.
Good.
Well, what do I need to do? And 8 times out of 10, my ending changes anyway before
Oh,
I
yeah.
get there.
Of
So,
course.
but yeah, it's always cool talking to other writers. And speaking of publishing, I do self-publish. I find I really haven't submitted to publishers, and I do have a friend. I want to say this just to make any authors or people who are aspiring to be an author aware, and it's more of a public service announcement. Be careful of vanity publishers. I had
Mhm.
a close friend who sunk like 10 grand into a vanity publisher, and he really hasn't seen anything
Oh,
from
yeah.
it, from promotion or any real returns on his investment. So, yes, submit to legit publishers, but if you have to pay a publisher, don't
Right.
do it.
No. The only time a vanity publisher is good is if you are publishing your family's memoirs and you're printing 50 books for all of
There
your
you go.
relatives, And even then, you can get those at almost any place now with print on demand,
Right,
you know.
right, exactly. Yeah, I use a company called Lulu.com. I'll give them a free
Oh, yeah.
plug. So that's where I go to get my print books. But I digress.
Hmm.
Oh man. So what are you working on now, Doug? Do you have anything in the fire that you're working on?
Well, music wise, I'm booked like all the way through September right now, which is
That's
crazy for a cover band working musician, But I actually have to, I looked at my schedule and said, you know what? I've got to book some time to go out backpacking or spend some time with the family, because if I don't, somebody's going to fill it up. So, for
yeah.
instance, this week, starting on Sunday, last Sunday, it was a birthday celebration for a local keyboard player, the keyboard player for Gina Osmond, actually. So we played a gig Sunday night. I had Monday off. Tuesday night, I had an in-person practice with a band called Cosmic Possum. We play Dead because we're a Grateful Dead cover band.
That's pretty cool.
And
Okay.
Wednesday, I had an online practice with a band called the Pranksters, which features Mike Lookinland, who played Bobby Brady on the Brady Bunch.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's a huge Deadhead. He's our keyboard player.
Oh,
So,
nice.
we rehearsed online with them. Then Thursday night, I rehearsed, with another band called Silver King, which has the keyboard player from The Doors in it. Not
Oh,
the original
wow.
one because he's passed on, but the guy who
Yeah.
plays now. And then last night, I played a live gig with Cosmic Possum, today, after we're finished, I'll be going up to Park City and braving the 6-7 feet of snow surrounding the stage to play a gig. Then tomorrow, starting the brand new, tomorrow Sunday, I'll be playing at another ski resort called Powder Mountain up by Ogden, Utah. And then I don't even know what's happening after that. So I'm constantly playing nowadays, trying to find time to even think about listening to music for my own pleasure or writing or seeing my wife or anything. Plus, I still work a day job.
Yeah.
So,
You're a busy guy. I can relate. I can relate for sure. Now, I don't know if I don't think I saw this in my notes, but do you do any songwriting?
I mean, besides the stuff you've listened to some of the stuff I've composed, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Lyrically, like what have you,
what's strange about my lyrics is I have a bunch of lyrics. I think I sent out 23 different lyrics to the band at one point that I was in at
mhm.
the time and said, "Hey, pick one. We'll go with it." Nobody picked one.
Oh
I
man.
just think it's I don't really write songs because when I look at songs, I realize, yeah, my stuff is really more literary. It's more poetry,
Yeah.
maybe more akin to old time songwriting or something. But I haven't really ever turned it into anything because I don't prefer to be a singer. So
Yeah.
it's not a thing that I really want to push. I'm much more into the instrumental stuff because as a kid, I was scarred as a singer. I should tell
Yeah.
that story.
Yeah. Tell it.
When I was little, I've had 4 brothers. We were all a year apart. So that meant we were all a couple inches shorter, like steps. My mother would dress us all the same and make us sing in church. Now, even when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, I knew it was bad. I had enough musical, ability to realize we really suck. But everybody's like, "Oh, you guys are so cute. It's such a nice thing. Oh, you look so sweet up there." But it embarrassed me to death. And so I never
Right.
wanted to sing again. So I
Uh,
still hold that now. People find out I sing and it's like, "You said you couldn't sing." I said, "No, I said I don't sing."
yeah, there's a difference. I
So
can't sing, and I'm tone deaf, so I think I sound great,
yeah.
but I'm terrible. Terrible.
Well, I think you should record something and put it out there for us to judge.
No, 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 no. Maybe a rap song or auto tune. Just
Yeah.
kidding. I'm not doing that either. But yeah, now, this is a question I asked Jen. I'm going to ask you the same
Mhm.
question. Living or dead, who would you like to play with? What performer that's out there now, a musical artist,
Mhm.
or one that's passed? Who would you like to take a time machine back or jump on their band today?
Well,
What artists do you like?
sad thing is my some of my main favorite artists that they've all passed away. They're all dead now.
Yeah,
You know, I don't know that I could even think about handling, but Frank Zappa. I don't know if you've ever listened to his stuff,
I
but
have.
you know, I saw his band from I was about 3 feet away from the stage, and
Oh
the
wow!
stage was only 2 feet tall, so I was right there in front of Frank.
So you could touch him.
And yeah, and they had Steve Vai as guitar player. And
Wow.
for people who don't know Steve Vai, he played with Whitesnake and David Lee
Oh yeah.
Roth. And the movie Crossroads, he was the devil's guitar player. So it's really fascinating to watch these guys. And I've always been just fascinated by that complex music to where you can go from incredibly, modern atonal stuff to suddenly then you've launched into a comedy act about something that happened at, the Denny's that day.
Right.
So you never know. I mean, I'd love to play there. And if I could have played with the Grateful Dead, but now Jerry's gone.
Yeah.
So that won't happen.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
John Lennon, to be able to play with him, that would be awesome too. But he's gone as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're all the artists who are gone. They're all sad, but his is especially sad
Oh yeah.
because what he had left in front of him. I mean, he
Hmm.
was so young, and
Oh
what
yeah.
he would have created and put out there.
Yeah.
It's no one will ever hear,
Yeah. Well,
and that's
like the generation kind of previous to us where they say they know exactly when Kennedy was shot. I
yeah,
remember exactly. I was working at a movie theater. The payphone rang, and it was a friend who was calling and saying, "John Lennon just got shot." I was like,
yeah,
"What? You're kidding?" It was a real blow,
Yeah,
Especially
yeah. Oh,
he'd just come out with that album, Double Fantasy, and it was doing
yep.
well. And he was talking about going on tour, and then all taken away.
Over. That's yeah, that hit me some kind of way too when it happened. And it still affects people to this day, you know?
Yeah.
So
Well, it
that's
changed the whole security business for artists.
oh yeah.
Suddenly they realized, hey, we need to protect ourselves. You know,
Yep. Yep.
that is one nice thing about Jen is she is so approachable that she's probably got more security than I realize. But you've got to meet her several times, and it wasn't
Well,
hard, was it?
no, she's
Yeah.
eh, I- and I love her to death, obviously, and I'm glad that she's so accessible. But in a way, maybe she shouldn't be. Yeah, don't hold me to that,
Uh,
Jen. But yeah, it's crazy. Like you can
yeah.
walk right up to her after the show.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
um, and
That's
I was gonna say I like the other band I listen to, Ad Nauseum is garbage, and
mhm.
they were pretty much like that after the show. As long as you know where they're coming out, they'll come and
Right.
talk to you.
Hmm.
Not quite like Jen, but it's pretty similar. But
Oh, yeah.
anyway, you were going to say something,
Oh, well, one nice thing about not being famous, or at least not being, famous outside of my own tiny little niche, is that,
right?
you know, nobody really has any desires for me at all. There's no fantasy about, oh, I'm going to get with Doug and this great thing's going to happen or anything like
Right.
that. And, you know, keeping under the radar has its perks. Like people always say, I want to be rich and famous. And I just say, no, I just want to be rich. I don't want to be famous.
That's right.
I want to walk down the street still if I want to. I don't want anybody, bugging me and,
Yeah.
pestering me for things.
Well, that's the weird and nice thing about Jen, I guess, is here. Maybe it's a little different in New Zealand. Here, she's not a household name.
Right.
Like she could come to Augusta, Georgia, and walk into the store, and she wouldn't get mobbed or anything like that.
Hmm.
But to the people that are fans of hers, they're like, "Oh my God, it's Jen Wigmore."
Yeah. Yeah.
So she's getting a little bit of the best of both worlds,
Yeah.
because her
Hmm.
fan base, they know who she is and they'll gravitate to her. But um, in some ways, I wish she were bigger here.
Right.
But in other ways, I'm like, oh, she's fine where she is.
Hmm.
But
Well,
anyway,
that's really the trick in any kind of business, especially if you're in the arts. You find
right,
where, okay, I'm enjoying what I'm doing and I can survive and make a decent living at it. I'm good. I don't need to, sell my soul to, you know, be in the NFL halftime show
right,
or,
right.
playing Carnegie Hall and all that kind of stuff. It just, you're like, okay, Pappy and Harriet's is good. I'm going to go have a good time and I'm making money and I'm able to support my family. I can still spend time with them. It
Yep.
seems like a great place to be.
Yeah, yeah. You're right. You're right. So it seems like she's got the best of both worlds going on, and it sounds like you have the best of three worlds going on. So, well,
Excuse me there.
no, you're fine. You're fine. I'd like to take this time for you to share with the audience anywhere they can maybe find your work. If there's any social media plugs you want to
Mhm.
do for yourself, maybe there's some, maybe there's uh, a band or musicians in your area or outside of your area that may want to get in touch with you
Mhm.
to possibly line something up. I don't know, whatever you got going on, but I want you to take this time to tell everyone where they can find you.
Well, Facebook, Doug Worthen. I think I just Doug Worthen
Yep.
and just look for the crazy guy who's got all the music posts and that'll be me. I am updating my website. It's dougworthen.com. I just
Okay.
hooked up with it and I used to be a web designer like 12 years ago. Trying to do the new stuff, it's like I'm completely lost now. I don't remember anything about it. My skills are worthless with the new software. So it's like I've got some bizarre page up there that just happened to get published. It's like nothing I even wrote, but in the next few weeks that should be up and running, even if I have to pay somebody to do it. And then I'll be
Okay.
able to put my music on there. But I'll start sharing more of my music and that because after you talked to me, I thought, I read my bio and it's kind of interesting. Maybe I should put some of this out there and let people
Yeah,
listen to
it's
music, because I didn't realize. I think I've recorded like 10 albums,
yeah,
something like
yeah.
that.
You
And
have an impressive resume here.
I've got everything from playing French horn in our local symphony hall, recorded a couple albums there, to you know an album with Mexican music, country, rock. It's just everything under the sun.
Well, I'm going to list some of the shows he's played because he's caught my eye too. Grease, I mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, which was a film my grandmother talked about ad nauseum when I was a kid, but we couldn't go see it.
Oh yeah.
Little Shop of Horrors. Now, the play and the film is one of my wife's favorite movies.
Oh
So,
yeah.
Little Shop of Horrors, yeah.
Uh,
Jesus Christ Superstar, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and West Side Story. Those are pretty cool shows you played.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
For a lot of
Doug,
years. Yeah.
yeah, Doug is got it going on. So definitely check him out. If your website is up right now, I'll put links in the podcast below. But
Yeah.
if not, I'll get them up whenever it's ready.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not super technically savvy either. I built my
Yeah.
website with Wix, and it was just drop,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to use WordPress, and it's not as easy as just drop, apparently.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, the real designers, I guess, use WordPress. I'm lazy, so I use Wix, and it's got a lot of
yeah.
pre-made templates, and
Yeah.
you just
Oh yeah.
drop things and type things up. So it's not
Yeah. I
that
think
bad.
I have an art website. I think it's Doug Worthen Art or something .weebly.com.
Oh, okay,
So I use
gotcha.
Weebly, but that was easy. I just dragged all my pictures in and said, do a photo array. And then I
Right.
typed in the descriptions. It's like, but that's a far cry, because from what I used to do, which was actually HTML coding.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, when you said 12 years ago, I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, he did coding.
which I didn't really enjoy, because when you're a musician and creative person, coding can really get you bogged down, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's boring.
Yes, it is. So I didn't code very often after that.
All right. Well, Doug, I appreciate you being on the show
Oh, you
today.
bet.
This is either going to be episode 2 or 3 in Backstage 421, the podcast. So this is brand new. I'm excited to have Doug on the show. I am Charles Campbell, author. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. We also have a Backstage 421 Facebook page that we've just launched. So go like the page. And I'm thinking we're going to have an episode every 2 weeks at this point. We may up the frequency as we go along, but that's how we're going to start. So thank you once again, Doug. I appreciate you being on the show. And yeah, that will do it for this episode of Backstage 421, the Musicians Only podcast. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Backstage 421, the Musicians Only podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Listener support links can be found below. Thank you for your support.